I trusted her with everything. That's what I keep coming back to when I try to make sense of what happened. I trusted my sister Sarah with the most painful, private parts of my life, and she turned them into content, blog posts, Instagram captions, a whole brand built on my suffering. It started 3 years ago when David and I began trying for a baby. We'd been married for 2 years, both of us 31, and everyone kept asking when we were going to have kids. My mom would make these little comments about wanting grandchildren. Sarah, who already had 2 kids by then, would joke about how great it would be for our children to grow up together as cousins. The first year, I wasn't worried. Everyone says it can take time. But when nothing happened after 12 months, I started getting nervous. David kept saying we should relax. That stress wasn't helping. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when I started confiding in Sarah. She was 4 years older than me. And she'd always been the person I turned to when life got complicated. When our parents divorced when I was 16, Sarah was the one who helped me through it. When I was struggling in college, she'd drive 3 hours just to take me to dinner and listen to me cry. She was my person, so when the doctor told us we needed to start fertility treatments, Sarah was the first person I called. "Oh, honey," she said, and I could hear her voice getting soft the way it did when she was really concerned. "I'm so sorry, but you know what? This is going to work out. You're going to be such an amazing mom." I remember crying on the phone with her that day, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the fertility clinic. The doctor had just explained that my egg quality was lower than expected for my age, and that IVF was going to be our best option. The whole thing felt so clinical, so removed from the way I'd imagined getting pregnant would be. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Sarah. "And please don't think I'm being paranoid, but I really need you to keep this private for now. I'm not ready for everyone to know." "Of course," she said immediately. "Victoria, you don't even have to ask. This is between us." That conversation was in March. By May, we'd started our first IVF cycle, and I was calling Sarah almost every day. The hormone injections made me feel crazy. I'd cry over commercials, snap at David for loading the dishwasher wrong, then feel guilty for hours afterward. Sarah would talk me through it all. "The hormones are just temporary," she'd say. "Remember when I was pregnant with Emma and I cried because the grocery store was out of the good bagels? This is just your body doing what it needs to do." I told her about every appointment, every test result, every side effect. When the first cycle failed, I sobbed to her for 2 hours. When we decided to try again, she was the one who encouraged me to keep going. "You're so strong," she'd tell me, "stronger than you know." Meanwhile, Sarah had started this mommy blog called Messy Beautiful Life. It had begun as just a way to document her kids' milestones, but it was growing. She'd gained a few thousand followers, and brands were starting to reach out about sponsorships. I was happy for her. She'd always been creative. And it seemed like she'd found something that fulfilled her. Our second IVF cycle failed in August. I was devastated. The doctor said we could try again, but the repeated failures were starting to take a toll on my marriage, my friendships, my sense of who I was. I felt broken in a way I'd never experienced before. That's when Sarah suggested I come stay with her family for a long weekend. "You need to get away from everything," she said. "Come up here, play with the kids, eat too much ice cream. It'll be good for you." I drove to her house in Portland that Friday afternoon, feeling grateful to have somewhere to escape. Sarah lived in this beautiful craftsman house with her husband Mike and their 2 kids, Emma, who was 7, and Jack, who was 4. Being around children usually made me sad during this time, but somehow being with Emma and Jack felt different. They were my niece and nephew. They loved me unconditionally. That weekend, I opened up to Sarah more than I ever had before. We stayed up late both nights, drinking wine and talking after the kids went to bed. I told her things I'd never said out loud before. How I sometimes resented couples who got pregnant easily. How I felt like my body was betraying me. How David and I had stopped having sex that wasn't timed around ovulation, and how that was killing the intimacy in our marriage. "I feel like I'm disappearing," I told her Saturday night. "Like I used to be Victoria, and now I'm just this woman who can't have babies. That's my whole identity now." Sarah hugged me and said all the right things. She told me I was more than my fertility struggles. She reminded me of all the other parts of my life that mattered. She made me feel seen and understood in a way that no one else had. On Sunday morning, as I was packing to leave, Sarah asked if she could pray with me. We weren't raised religious, but she'd started going to church after Emma was born. I wasn't really into it, but I appreciated the gesture. We sat on her bed and she held my hands and said this beautiful prayer about hope and patience and trusting that everything would work out the way it was supposed to. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Having someone who really understood what I was going through made all the difference. 3 weeks later, my friend Jenna texted me a link. "Hey, is this about you?" The link led to Sarah's blog. The post was titled, "When Someone You Love Can't Have a Baby." My heart started racing as I read the first paragraph. Last month, someone very close to me came to stay for the weekend. She's been trying to have a baby for over a year, and the journey has been heartbreaking to watch. As she sat in my kitchen, crying over her third failed IVF cycle, I was reminded of how precious fertility really is, and how we often take it for granted. I kept reading, feeling sick to my stomach. Sarah had written about our entire weekend, not with my name, but with enough specific details that anyone who knew us would know exactly who she was talking about. The wine we drank, the prayer we'd shared, even the fact that her friend lived 3 hours away and drove up for the weekend. But the worst part was how she'd twisted everything. The post wasn't really about supporting someone through infertility. It was about how the experience had made Sarah more grateful for her own children, how it had reminded her to cherish every moment with Emma and Jack, how she felt blessed to be able to have children easily. I found myself looking at my beautiful babies that weekend and just feeling overwhelmed with gratitude, she'd written. Sometimes it takes seeing someone else's struggle to remind us of how lucky we are. The comment section was full of people praising Sarah for her vulnerability and her beautiful heart. "You're such a good friend. This brought tears to my eyes." "Thank you for the reminder to be grateful," I called her immediately. "Sarah, what the hell is this? What do you mean, the blog post about my IVF? You promised me you'd keep this private." There was a long pause. "Victoria, I never used your name, and I think you're overreacting. The post is really about gratitude and it's about me, Sarah, my private struggle that I trusted you with. You used my pain to get blog engagement. That's not what this is about. I was trying to help other people who might be going through the same thing, and honestly, I think you're being a little paranoid. No one's going to know it's you." But people did know. Jenna knew immediately. My cousin Lisa called me the next day to ask if I was okay. Even my coworker mentioned something about seeing an article about infertility that reminded her of me. I was humiliated and furious, but Sarah acted like I was being dramatic. She kept insisting that she'd been trying to help, that the post was really about supporting people through difficult times, that I was being too sensitive. "Maybe you should look at why you're so angry about this," she said, during one of our phone fights. "Maybe there's something else going on here." That made me question myself. Was I overreacting? Was I so consumed by my fertility struggles that I couldn't see that Sarah had good intentions? I decided to let it go. We were sisters. This was just a misunderstanding. But then it happened again. In October, we started our third IVF cycle. This time, I was more cautious about what I shared with Sarah. But I still needed someone to talk to. When this cycle failed too, I was beyond devastated. The doctor suggested we take a break before trying again. "Maybe this is the universe telling us something," I said to Sarah on the phone. "Maybe I'm not supposed to be a mother." "Don't say that," she said. "You can't give up now." 2 weeks later, she published another post. "When hope feels impossible, a message for my sister in the storm." This one was even more specific. She wrote about how her sister, and this time she did use the word sister, was considering giving up on her dream of having children. She shared details about our phone conversation, including the phrase about the universe sending a message. She wrote about how hard it was to watch someone you love lose hope. But again, the focus ended up being on Sarah. How she was praying for her sister. How she was trusting God's plan. How she believed everything happens for a reason. The comments were full of people telling Sarah what a wonderful sister she was, how lucky I was to have her support. This time, I didn't call her. I was too angry to speak. Instead, I sent her a long email, telling her exactly how betrayed I felt. I explained that she was using my most vulnerable moments as content for her blog, and that it needed to stop immediately. Her response was 2 sentences. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I'll be more careful about what I share in the future." Not, I'm sorry I hurt you. Not, I'm sorry I violated your privacy. Just, I'm sorry you feel that way. Things were tense between us after that, but we managed to maintain a relationship. We still talked, but I was much more guarded about what I shared. The easy intimacy we'd always had was gone, replaced by this careful politeness. In January, David and I decided to try IVF one more time. We'd been trying for almost 2 years at that point, and we agreed this would be our last attempt before exploring other options. I didn't tell Sarah we were doing another cycle. I barely told anyone. Somehow, this cycle felt different from the beginning. Maybe it was because I wasn't stressed about sharing every detail with Sarah. Maybe it was because David and I had gone to counseling and worked through some of our relationship issues. Or maybe it was just luck, but when we went in for the pregnancy test, I felt cautiously hopeful. The test was positive. I was pregnant. David and I cried in the parking lot of the clinic. After 2 years of disappointment, we were finally going to have a baby. We decided to wait until after the first trimester to tell anyone. But I was bursting with joy and relief. At 8 weeks, I had some light bleeding. The doctor said it was probably normal, but I was terrified. I'd already lost so much in this journey. I couldn't bear the thought of losing this pregnancy too. That night, I broke down and called Sarah. I needed my sister. I needed someone who understood how precious this pregnancy was. How scared I was of losing it. "Oh my God, Victoria," she screamed when I told her the news. "I'm so happy for you. I knew this would happen." I cried as I told her about the bleeding, about how scared I was. She was wonderful, supportive, and reassuring, and everything I needed her to be. For a moment, it felt like we were back to being the sisters we used to be. "Can I ask you for something?" I said before we hung up. "Please don't write about this. I'm not ready for anyone else to know yet. And after everything that happened before, I really need this to stay between us." "Of course," she said. "Victoria, I learned my lesson. This is your news to share when you're ready." I trusted her. I wanted to trust her. 3 days later, my friend Amy texted me. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you." I stared at the text, confused. For what? The pregnancy. I saw Sarah's post about finally becoming an aunt. "I'm so excited for you guys." My hands were shaking as I opened Sarah's blog. The post was titled, "The Rainbow After the Storm, My Sister's Miracle." She'd written the entire story. The years of trying, the failed IVF cycles, the recent positive pregnancy test, the bleeding scare, everything I'd told her in confidence just 3 days earlier. But this post was different from the others. This time, Sarah had positioned herself as the central figure in my fertility journey. She wrote about how she'd supported me through everything, how she'd never given up hope, even when I wanted to quit, how she'd prayed constantly for this miracle. "I feel like I've been pregnant alongside my sister this whole time," she'd written. "I felt every loss, every disappointment, every moment of hope, and now, finally, we're having a baby." We're having a baby, like it was her pregnancy too. The comments section was full of people congratulating Sarah on becoming an aunt, praising her for being such a devoted sister, asking for updates on her sister's pregnancy. I miscarried 2 days later. The bleeding that had scared me turned out to be the beginning of the end. At 9 weeks, we lost the baby. David and I were devastated, but this loss felt different from the failed IVF cycles. This time, we'd actually been pregnant. We'd had hope, and now it was gone. I couldn't handle the sympathy calls and texts that started pouring in because of Sarah's blog post. People I barely knew were reaching out to express their condolences. My pregnancy, my loss, had become public because Sarah couldn't keep my private pain private. When I called to tell her about the miscarriage, the first thing she said was, "Oh no, what am I going to tell my blog followers? What am I going to tell my blog followers? Not, 'I'm so sorry for your loss.' Not, 'How are you doing?' Not, 'What can I do to help?' Her first concern was how this would affect her online image. "You're not going to tell them anything," I said. "This is not content, Sarah. This is my life." "But I already posted about the pregnancy. People are going to expect updates. I can't just pretend it didn't happen." "Yes, you can, because it was never yours to share in the first place." She did end up posting about the miscarriage, a long emotional piece about grief and loss and trusting God's plan. She shared quotes about angels in heaven and everything happening for a reason. The comments were full of people comforting Sarah, telling her how sorry they were for her family's loss, praising her strength in the face of tragedy. My miscarriage had become her content. My grief had become her brand. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to Sarah since. People keep asking me when we're going to work things out. She's your sister, they say. Family is forever. My mom has called me 3 times, asking when I'm going to forgive Sarah and move on. She didn't mean any harm, Mom keeps saying. She was just trying to support you. But that's not what this was about. This wasn't about Sarah trying to support me. This was about Sarah building her online presence on the foundation of my pain. Every failed cycle, every moment of hope, every devastating loss, it all became content for her to monetize. Last week, I found out that Sarah's blog has over 50,000 followers now. She's got a book deal. She's been featured in some parenting magazines as an authentic voice in the mommy blogging space. Her bio describes her as a mother, writer, and advocate for women facing fertility challenges. An advocate for women facing fertility challenges. Built on the back of exploiting her own sister's fertility challenges, David and I have decided to stop trying to have biological children. We're looking into adoption now, and for the first time in 3 years, I feel hopeful about our future. We're going to be parents. It might not happen the way I originally imagined, but it's going to happen, and when it does, Sarah won't know about it. She won't be there for the home study visits, or the waiting, or the phone call that changes our lives. She won't get to hold our child or be the aunt she always talked about wanting to be. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, if I should try to rebuild our relationship. She's still my sister, after all. We grew up in the same house, shared the same childhood memories, survived our parents' divorce together, but then I remember sitting in my car reading that first blog post, feeling so exposed and betrayed. I remember her asking what she was going to tell her followers when I miscarried. I remember seeing my most private pain turned into inspirational content for strangers on the internet. Trust isn't something you can rebuild with someone who monetized your suffering. Love isn't something you can maintain with someone who turned your vulnerable moments into her brand. Sarah chose her blog over our relationship. She chose her followers over her sister. She chose content over compassion. I didn't end our relationship. She did. The moment she decided my pain was worth more to her as a blog post than as a sacred confidence between sisters. People ask me if I miss her. Of course I do. I miss the sister I thought I had. The one who held my hand during our parents' divorce. The one who drove 3 hours to comfort me in college. The one who prayed with me in her bedroom that weekend, when I felt so broken. But that sister was never real. The real Sarah was someone who could look at my deepest pain and see dollar signs. Someone who could watch me cry and think about how she could turn those tears into content. Someone who could promise to keep my secrets and then publish them for the world to see 3 days later. I miss the sister I thought I had, but I don't miss the sister I actually had. Because the sister I actually had was never really on my side at all.